everyone. Good evening, good morning, whatever time it is. I'm so glad that you attended tonight. Thank you so much for your time. We have as our guest here Della Leahy, and she is an app developer. She just graduated from the Rad Women um, Intro to Coding Part 1. And that's what got me interested in interviewing her, because since I started building my own apps, they're very simple, but it got me very interested and kind of addicted. So I managed to convince her to be on the hot seat tonight.
Thank you.
So Della, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed tonight.
Okay.
So could you tell us about yourself and what you're currently doing in your job?
Yes, the ever popular "Who am I?" question. So I guess I'll lead into my name is Della Leahy, and I love a good challenge. In terms of using my own knowledge and thinking to basically solve a problem. That really gives me a high, and that's, I guess, knowing that was a drive toward my background. So I have a history and experience in science and healthcare. I just love the subject, and now I'm headed in the direction of development, which satisfies those the challenges that I seek. So I, as Lori mentioned, I'm currently an application developer, and I worked in the healthcare industry as a medical physicist. And there was a transition that I had in between. I'm headed on the developer path, and I'm really excited. So that's a little bit about me.
So now, your job right now, what is it, and how did you land your job?
Yeah. So as an application developer, what I typically would do is, based on what the stakeholders where I work, either people who, well, mainly people who are within my company, not necessarily on my team, sometimes on my team, they might have a request for a solution that's based off of Salesforce. So given what their needs are, what I would do is work with them, do some collaboration, figure out what that is, and build that. And it could be something as big as, like right now I'm building an application to take a process that's being hosted by a third party and moving it onto the Salesforce site. It could be that big, or it could be as small as just making one business, adding one business process automation piece, which would help my team to be able to make record updates, for example, much more efficiently. So it's a lot of building and thinking, going back and forth. And that's basically, in a nutshell, what I do as an application developer. And I think you asked another question, which was, how did
you land that job?
Oh, right. Okay. So so you'll hear a lot about this, and this really works. And I figured I'd touch on it too, through networking. It was around maybe a little bit more than a year ago that I was attending a WIT DC group session. And there was a Salesforce admin there who had advertised that his company was looking for a role. So he gave a little bit, I think it was just the title that was mentioned, application developer. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so exciting, because I rarely see that. During my job search, I would typically see Salesforce administrator, at the time at least.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about, oh, wow, maybe this is something that I could do. So I reached out to him behind the scenes on LinkedIn. He shared a little bit more about it, gave me the role requirements, and the rest is history. So
I think there's a lot more of that now coming up. Salesforce developer jobs.
Yeah, it's pretty hot.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, why did you transition from your healthcare job or whatever else job you had before
Yes,
Salesforce?
yes. Good question. So, I came by this route. So I previously had a role in healthcare and I worked as a medical physicist, but then I had a number of years where I took a break for family. But toward the tail end of that, because I knew I wanted to go back to work full time, there was also the thought, well, I could go back to what I was doing, but the technology had changed so much based on what I was doing. It was mainly with hardware technology, so working with linear accelerators, and also some high tech, uh, basically machinery to treat patients that had changed. So I thought that would be a much for having to go through residency again and sitting boards again. So I thought, well, what else can I do that would satisfy my desire to have a challenge? And back in the day, so when I was in high school, actually we had a computer course where it just went over basic programming. And that was a bit interesting to me at the time. So in thinking through all of the different possibilities, I thought, you know what, I think I could explore software development or basically technology, not that specifically, but technology. So I knew I needed an in, and what I ended up doing was just looking in general for how I could transition into the IT field. So what ended up happening was I looked for a while. It took a long time, maybe about 2 years. I did a lot of networking. And I'm going to say again, through networking, prior to getting into Salesforce, I actually ended up getting a role as a business analyst. So it was a program. Yeah. So it was a program actually that would train you in various technologies, Tableau, Power BI, SQL. And I got a little bit of a taste for it. In that program, though, it just took a while in order to get a job. So in any event, I worked with that company for a while. I got laid off, and then that's when I transitioned into the application developer role that I currently have. So it was like a non-traditional path, not really having a software or IT background to get here.
But did you have any fears with that transition? It's not.
Oh,
I don't think it's a big transition coming from BA to Salesforce.
Oh, right. That wasn't a huge transition, but transitioning, just having like the career break and just getting into IT, I thought it was.
Yeah.
The fears there was that, can I do this? Also, you know, I'm many years out of college or school. Do I have what it takes? So there was that fear there. As I think maybe most people might experience that. But what I've come to learn is that, especially through hearing, and this is where networking is important, learning about other people's backgrounds, I got to be more comfortable with basically what I knew and how I could do things, because there were others who also came into that space non-traditionally. And if you have patience and you have a will to learn, you're there. Yeah.
So when you were going for your first certificate, what challenges did you face?
Yep. So
you're quite the nerd. So it probably wasn't that much of a challenge.
Well, so for that same program that I entered into, how I got into Salesforce actually, we were supposed to have been learning Python toward the training, the 10-week training session, but that ended up getting replaced by Salesforce. So we had a gentleman come in from a company and introduce us to Salesforce. He actually offered at the end of like about a week of training, he gave us some Salesforce vouchers and said, you know what you can do is I'll just give you the basics here. You go through Trailhead, complete a certain number of badges, and then you can sit the exam. So my team and I, we did take that opportunity. on the first go, none of us passed, but we did learn something though. So,
Mhm.
so I didn't clear the exam on the first pass. Sometime it passed, and then I ended up being placed on another project.
Mhm.
And that project actually got me a little bit of more experiences in Salesforce. There was a small company, and they said, we have Salesforce. We don't really have anybody who can help us navigate it. Can you help? So I think the combination of Trailhead, which I didn't quite understand because I couldn't really translate to coming from science and healthcare to sales, for example,
Mhm.
with a lot of the stories that are in there, the trails. But being able to actually practice it, like security and being able to security and access, and being able to look at the data model, and
Mm.
also build say, a, a solution, an
Mhm.
application. It made sense actually doing it. So after just having a couple of weeks of that experience, it took off. So when I took the exam, it made sense to me. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, taking the Salesforce exam then was much better than when it was at the start. Yeah.
And what were your challenges before landing that first Salesforce job?
Um, I think I would say challenges would be um, being so one thing I would say in just being able to to know that when coming from like working about a decade in healthcare to working in say a business with Salesforce, it's a different industry, different structure, even the people, the culture is different. So
Mhm.
that was a bit of a struggle for me. Um, but I think having that ability to adapt is helpful. Putting yourself in the mindset that, okay, well, this is different. I can learn this. And also, I think this is common to hear, but the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Um, just, you're hired to do this. And I'm like thinking, oh, well, I don't know. How come I'm here? Can I really do this?
How's the
But
support system in your work?
so I was the sole person who was a Salesforce admin.
Mm.
Um, However, and I think a lot of people realize this, probably who are here, you have this whole Salesforce community that I started to tap into after I realized that there was the Trailhead community, and also blogs or different community groups. So I
Mhm.
started to reach out and say, hey, there's this task that I have, and I'm not quite sure. I've tried this. How do I do this? So that having that community support was important. And I think after being introduced to that, and knowing that you're not the only one who might not be able to know of something right away, um, that helped with the struggle of imposter syndrome.
So when you're doing something like that, problem solving and just trying to figure out things, what's your typical timeline before you finally come up with a solution?
Um, so
Or does it
uh,
depend on how hard the problem is?
yeah, I think it depends. So uh, I would say, and I guess I'm looking at the role that I currently have. Some things are pretty simple or easy, and I think that's just because I've actually done them in practice. Um, in terms of, because I think you're asking about how long until you said your timeline is.
Yeah, because let's say you're trying to figure out something, a small task, and
Mhm.
then you're trying to create a flow. How long does it usually take for you to find a solution for that simple task?
Yeah.
And do you have a deadline?
Yeah, so that's one thing too that I've come to learn is helpful in this role is especially for, well, actually for both, whether it's small or big tasks,
Mhm.
what sort of time frame do you want something? Um, but it really does depend on the ask, because it could be as simple as, for example, with coding. if, say, the text needs to be changed on a Lightning Web component or just a user interface. That is a simple fix. If it doesn't involve, for example, navigating to a link, you just want the text changed. If it's more complex, like say, when the user clicks here, I want the records to be sent in this location. That one takes a little longer. So, it does depend on the ask, but I think finding out when when they need it by helps with basically time boxing and figuring out, well, how much time do I spend on this until, say, if I hit a stopping point, reaching out for help, for example. But yeah, it's really dependent on the task.
Mm-hmm. So right now I am in the process of getting certified. Hopefully I will get that and gonna be applying for a job. I would like to hear about the process that you went through when you were in that stage.
Yes. Okay. So that's one thing that's different from being in healthcare, is that I was not familiar with the additional piece. So you have the interview where they get to know you.
Mm-hmm.
And also you can talk about, your interests with Salesforce, but then there's the additional piece about the technical interview, which I had no idea about, but I have experienced, I would say, in depth twice. So that is it's a little bit nerve wracking, but it's useful because it's just there to test your knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up having some basic questions, and it takes different formats. So in one case, I ended up being just asked in conversation various questions, like if, I guess, for example, I don't remember exactly what it was, but if you have a user and they have logged into Salesforce to look at a report and they can't see this specific data, how would you solve that? Questions like that. And then there's another experience where I had like a list, and then I had a time, and then I had to go and basically write down my answers right there on the fly. There was also another technical interview where I was given an org to log into, and a series of questions on please do this, do that. So it takes on various formats, but it serves its purpose just to test, what you know.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm nervous. So, okay. From your background in healthcare, what would you think was the most valuable skill that you are able to transfer onto Salesforce?
So what comes top of mind is what we call now in Salesforce requirements gathering. So from healthcare to the work that I was doing, if say we had a patient coming in and they needed to be treated with radiation, there was a couple of things you needed to know. Where was the area that you wanted to treat? Are there any organs that you wanted to protect? What sort of dose that you needed to deliver to the patient? So all of the crucial pieces that you need to arrive at the solution, having a conversation with the physician, or even talking with the therapist who would set up the patient.
Communication as well, yeah.
Correct. Well, and that's another thing too, communication, requirements gathering to arrive at that solution, because the more that you get that information, the better you can arrive at something that would work. So yeah, I think I would say that. There's a couple others too. I want to say documentation. And that's something that I didn't even think about in the tech field, but documenting as a somebody working in healthcare is key, because how did you treat this patient? What time did you administer it? Who were the people involved? Things like that. Translating to, if you're creating or building something, you want to have in there either in the description field, what is the purpose of this field? But not even that, if you have something that's bigger that you're building, what I like to do is on specific days, I basically write out what I've done, how I've accomplished it. And it helps because let's just say if you have to troubleshoot it, you could look back and see what process you went through. But it also helps for people who are coming in. How did they accomplish this? And the same thing with coding too, because when you are looking at changing the code, you can update it, put your initials in there and say, this is the reason why, or comment in there why you did what you did. So that somebody coming in is not really sure, well, when did this happen and why did it happen, for example.
So where do you do that in the org? Your
Oh,
documentation.
Well, so the piece that I was talking about with the description would be like if you're creating a field, for example,
Yeah.
or if you're creating a report, like what's the report for? In terms of the bigger details, like if I'm building something and it requires different components, that's actually something that I keep like in a text editor. And I guess there's various options that you could use. I just like to use a text editor, based on the date, and then I itemize what I've done, and even why I've done it, with even links, reference links. And I can pretty it up later, but I tend to do that just so I don't forget at the time. And then I can, like I said, clean it up so that when I need to look back at it, that I have that, or somebody else can use it.
So do you upload it to like the library or something?
So for example, when we're doing deployments, we have what we call like a deployment tracker. So that's just simply like a Microsoft Word doc, and it lists like the components and what we've made, what changes we've made, and why we've done it, and a link to perhaps, like, say if it's a ticket or a project request. So that's something that we keep in Teams, which everyone has access to within my group. And that's how we track that.
Are you working remotely, hybrid, or in office?
So initially it was remote, and then they opened up the office. So now it's hybrid. So I go in 2 days out of the week, and the other days I'm here at home. So it actually is, it works out. It's nice because then you have the balance of basically interacting with people, when you're in the office, and then, I guess being more focused when you're at home, or, well, at least for me.
How do you compare the culture in Salesforce now with your job compared to the healthcare culture?
Okay, I
Quite
have
a
to be
difference.
honest. Yeah, it is. So for me, just based on the roles that I had in radiation therapy, it just seems more relaxed.
Oh yeah,
So
that's good.
yeah, it's more relaxed with Salesforce as opposed to, and I don't know if it's just when you're working with physicians. I mean, of course, there were laughs and we had back and forth and just jokes and things like that, but it's not as tense, I guess I would say. Yeah, but then also you're dealing with patients too, and
Right.
then you're dealing with an org or technology, which can affect, can be customer facing. But I think I would say I felt more on pins and needles in healthcare, because you want to make sure that patient gets the best quality. You do want that in technology as well, but it's not as it's not as I guess tense. I don't know.
And it's not a matter of life and death.
Right. Yes. So, and I tend to have that mindset with some things, but I've slowly, like, kind of like not being as, I don't know what the word is, just transitioning into the culture. So it's definitely different though.
Less politics too, I'm guessing.
You mean with in technology?
Compared to
I don't know. I
healthcare,
guess
it probably depends. But from
I think
from
it
where I
depends.
Yeah, where I was working, politics was even if I was working nights, politics was awful.
Okay.
But
Yeah. That's
so what is your personal career growth trajectory?
yes. So one thing that I have noticed is that when I'm heads down in the code, I don't know what it is, but I'm really excited, like to whether it's building something or troubleshooting something or figuring out, what's going on. That's really exciting. So, and applying that, what I'd like to do, because I'm very new to code, is just to become more experienced with it and more confident. So I think as long as I'm trending on the developer path, that will make me happy. So just keeping up to date. So for example, Rad Women Part 2 is there, and my intention is to go in and knock that out as well. But I'm definitely headed on the developer path and I'm going to add this too, I think having the admin and analyst skills is important though, with the developer path, because it helps you to be more, it just, I think, helps you to be a better developer. It's just like, say, if you are an admin, having having a BA type skill set, and also maybe even understanding code a little bit is also advantageous. But I'm definitely more. I get a lot of excitement and energy from projects that involve code. So I think that's where I'm. That's where I'm.
Now, do you intend to go to become a architect?
So I thought about that.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure yet. I think given some time, once I feel more confident with reading and writing and building with the code, I just want to get to that point and then decide. But I'm definitely open-minded. Yeah.
What is a typical day in your life?
Okay.
At work.
Okay. That's a good question. So I guess I'll just run through from beginning. Usually my day starts off with if there's emails, I go and check those. Actually, sometimes I take a peek at them the night before, just so I can kind of prepare.
That's overtime.
I know, but it just helps because there might be like a long list of them. But I tend to start my day by going through any emails, because if there's something that's time sensitive, at least there's the whole day for if I need some more information for the recipient to be able to provide it. Then with our team, we actually have check-ins. It's kind of like stand-ups, I guess you could say, every day. We just kind of go over maybe what we did the day before, what we plan on doing today, and if there's any help that we need within the team. And then after that, if there are no meetings planned, or there might be some meetings planned, but in between, what I would do is section off my day in terms of, well, what are the priorities that I have? And I might have 2 or 3 big things, and I would take chunks, and then I would say take a chunk of time, maybe if it's an hour, 2 hours, and focus on that one piece. Then if there's a meeting or a break, then I tackle the next task. Toward the end of the day, we have a ticketing system. So these would be more on the lines of not necessarily projects, but things that should be just shuttled through quickly. Like somebody's not able to, or somebody's seeing an error on something. And if it's, declarative, then that one's quick. If it involves code, I would assess it and see if it will take more than, say, I don't know, a couple of days, then that becomes a project. But yeah, tickets toward the end of the day. And then it would be for me just attending like any Salesforce meetings, which is actually what I was doing about last year this time. But as the year got busy, I kind of trailed off. So I'm trying to, at the beginning of this year, get back into attending some of those communities.
What's what's
community
your
meetings.
what's your company doing with regards to personal career growth?
Let's
Are
see.
they
So
is your company supportive?
yes, so definitely is. So there's a couple of different things like I think this also requires a certain amount of time. Once you're there for a certain amount of time, they do support education. Let's just say if you wanted to take a couple of courses within my team, if there's any training that's needed or if there's any area that can be filled in, some knowledge that would be useful. That's something I could bring up with my manager, and they're very supportive in helping me find that out or schedule that. There's also conferences too that they support, all to do with just learning and trying to improve, what we're doing and make our work more efficient. So yeah.
So currently, it's like with the skills gap that Salesforce is having. There's like a vortex where some of the more experienced ones go somewhere else. Is there such a thing in your company? Like, as the more senior one probably will want to lessen their time working or maybe transfer to a different company. Do you see yourself
Um,
filling in?
yeah. Well, I've been there for a year. We actually have a very small team.
Mhm.
Um, we have someone who is more of the senior. Well, we have like a mixture. I think so. We have like the admin. We have like a tech lead, developer. We also have some outsourced developers too. Um, so I don't. I think so. In terms of me, there's only one of me, so I'm not really sure about uh, how that translated to people who had the role. I don't think anyone had this role previously, but I don't see there hasn't been actually any turnover in our small team in terms of once, and I've only been there, like I said, for a year, so I don't really have that much of a uh, I guess answer to that. But
You haven't seen the higher ones leave or
well,
transfer.
so I think outside of the team, although I'm not really as familiar with, I am kind of familiar with their work, but not really, if that makes any sense. So we have a small, close-knit team. Um, and I came into the group with these people and they're still here. So I guess I don't know, it's hard to say, based on their level of experience, but we're all still here. So yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm really, really excited that I saw a different path for ex healthcare workers. Because when I was starting Trailhead, all I could think of was that I probably need to go through the health cloud trail mix or something,
Mhm.
something to do with that. And I was like, I was really focused on going towards that path until someone told me I don't even do anything with healthcare right now. Oh, really? So, and then when I was building the apps, I was like, this is fun. And that's what made me look into app developing. I'm not sure that I do have the skills at this point. I just know that I've experienced making my custom objects, doing those fields and relationships and whatnot, and the layout. So it was fun, but I'm glad to see a different path. So, what advice would you give to to us transitioners from healthcare into Salesforce?
Okay. So I would say, so what you touched on earlier, I was going to say, if
Yeah.
you can build something, that's a skill right there. So I wouldn't discount, that you don't have the skills. If you if you can build it and you get something to work, that right there. And even if you don't, that's like on the path or trajectory.
Thank you.
Um, yes, so definitely keep learning and keep expanding on that. So for people transitioning from healthcare to IT, I guess a couple of things come to mind, and these are in random orders. I'm going to say networking, I think, is great. And this is really interesting coming from a lot of people say they don't see me as an introvert. I actually am an introvert. So getting back into
Too.
work full time was really, I had a friend who actually pulled me into a couple of different conferences and meetings, and she got me on the same path. She got me on that path of networking. And it just becomes easier over time. But I would say networking, getting to meet lots of people, exchanging information, attending meetings where you can learn more. That's really useful in terms of transitioning. I think if you worked in healthcare, you have a good deal of transferable skills. Like I mentioned, with the requirements gathering, problem solving, documentation, yeah, and even more so sometimes if you're working like in a time crunch, you can actually move that over to Salesforce and IT, except it's not as you know you're not as pressed, but you still will have to work toward a deadline. Um, so I think keeping in mind all of those things and just if say you're looking for roles, just keep practicing and working, because the more experience you have, you can talk about it. And I know for me, I'm very visual. So if I'm actually explaining something that's happening, if I've done it, I can actually talk about it, based on where I've gone and what I've done. So that, meaning you have the trailheads there. Don't stop there. The projects and super badges, like right now, I'm in the middle of one, and I know I'm going to do it. I just don't know when. They're really tough, but that helps. So, and it's not just for healthcare workers too. I would say just for anyone doing a lot of the trails, especially the super badges, which would support also getting certifications. But that combination, as well as like what you're doing, informational interviewing and networking, that's the advice I would give. Yeah, that I think would be useful. So, and advantageous. So
That's good
yeah,
to know.
yeah.
So if being an app developer is, I am predicting that it's gonna be a really, really hard path. But if I really want to go that way, what what steps should I take? How should I plan for that now?
Um, so I would say, and you're talking about in terms of finding a role like that,
Um,
or you,
like suggestions for the courses or the network group, etc. Something like
okay.
that.
So I would say, because when you talk about app development, that covers both declarative and programmatic. Could be either one or the other or both. A couple of things come to mind. The super badges, like process automation super badge. There's also another super badge, I think, app customization specialist. Looking at those. The process automation one, that's the one I'm currently on. App specialization, that's one I want to do next. Also, working toward the certifications. I'm also currently working toward my process app builder. Platform app builder. And in terms of, I would say also, you could look at Rad Women.
Red women.
And yeah, and I would say, even if you don't want to be a developer, it's just enlightening. And I would recommend anyone, even if you just, I just want to be an admin, it really helps you to be able to see that, oh, well, when I'm doing this, this is what's happening. So even, in terms of reading the code, that's what you'll learn. But if you end up not practicing it after, you'll have that foundational knowledge of that and be able to basically, when you're meeting with developers, translate a little bit better and communicate better. what you're doing with the portfolios, I think if you know, as if you can show project wise that you're building, like I said, and using that knowledge, that is key, because it's not just for you showcasing anything, but it's just reinforcing what you've learned. Because you may even come across something new and you try it, and then you just commit that to memory, practice that again. That's useful. What else is good? There's also, so there's, if you want to head toward the code side, there's also developer.salesforce.com, which is a website. You can sign up for developer org, and there's a forum on there. You can post questions. I've had lots of questions. I can't wait till the point where I'm the one answering more of the questions than asking them. But yeah, so there's that. The Trailblazer community is good. I found that Twitter too, there's a lot of people in there who do development, and they post some amazing stuff. And I would think, oh, I was today years old when I just found this out. So, for example, I'm just going to be really transparent here. Just coming in as an app developer and coming in from no coding background, working as an app developer. So there's something, I'm sure you've heard of, Lightning Web Components.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so then there's a developer console, which you can go into, and then you can go into your different like classes and Visual Force pages and look at the code. So there was a task or a project basically to make a change on a Lightning Web Component. And I'm taking a long time and I'm spinning my wheels trying to look for this file, the name of the file that's in the developer console, until I learned, of course, just a newbie at this, but now I know, you need an IDE in order to be able to look at that, because the developer console does not, you'll not be able to find the Lightning Web Component in there. So an IDE like Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ. Visual Studio Code is a free open source tool that you can just download and you can practice with. You can also connect it to your Trailhead org, and then you'll be able to see all the code behind what drives everything, which is kind of neat. So even if you don't have actual projects or a job that will ask of you to make changes, you can just work with that, connecting that. There's also a trail on how to connect Visual Studio Code, and there's tons of blogs. I'm going to say too, Googling, being a really good Googler helps, because that's also what I do.
Googling is a skill.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you would find a ton of, you'll almost end up, I think, finding a lot of repetitive blogs that you go to based on what you search for, and you'll find the ones that you like. And if anyone, I'm just saying this too before the session ends, if you have any questions, I'm really an open book. Just ask away, because sometimes you don't know. But I have like favorite blogs, and there's different, there's a ton of resources out there. Even connecting with kind of like what you're doing, Lori, and I'm sure other people are here, connecting with some of the known Salesforce users or MVPs, or people who are just well known. They are very supportive in terms of, oh, you're trying to set up your Visual Studio Code and you're getting this error. Oh, well, why don't you do this? Or they might point you to a resource or a blog. So that I found is pretty helpful. Yeah, for app development, or just in general, just being in Salesforce.
Okay, just one more question.
Yep.
When you got into that Rad Women Intro to Coding, how did you get into that?
So there's a couple of different steps, but basically they would have like about 3 WebEx sessions, which are mandatory, and you have to sign up. So if you go to their website, when they do have the offerings coming up, you just select one of those WebExes, make sure that you use the email address that you want to get correspondence back and forth when you're doing the course. You make sure you sign up with that. They will just give you an overview of it. It doesn't cost anything. It's free. You are basically, once you go and attend the WebEx, they take that information that you've attended, because and make sure you stay there till the end. They'll
Mhm.
put your name, I think, in a hat. There's a random generator that occurs where they will, based on the number of coaches that they have and the number of
Mhm.
people, they can put you, oh, and also based on the time zones that you're in, put you in groups. But that's all stated in the WebExes. And then you get assigned. Now, you might get assigned on the first go or not. Like I mentioned, Rad Women 2, I did a sign up for, but I didn't get in. But that's because it's a more condensed group. And I understand that I'll be on a wait list for the next go round. So,
Mhm.
I figured that just means I have to practice and do more code challenges in between to make sure I keep up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's free. It's just a matter of waiting and being assigned randomly. So
That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for answering all my questions. And I hope the others, if they are planning to get into app development too, that they gain some valuable insights from you. I'm
Thank you for
excited.
having me.
All right.
And
And
I'm
maybe you can list down all those resources that you mentioned, and
sure.
then we'll share to the group.
Oh
All
yeah,
right.
definitely. And like I said, I'm open if anyone wants to connect and have more questions. Please don't hesitate to ask.